Dolores Cannon, a world-famous hypnotist with more than 40 years of experience in hypnosis, past lives, and discovering mystical knowledge about Earth's history and human history. She has lifted the veil of secrets about the past as well as the future of humanity on this planet. From the mid to late 1980s, Dolores's work took her in a completely new direction of discovery, that of investigating unidentified flying objects and aliens. Most cases of so-called alien abductions, Dolores said, are actually mutual agreements made before reincarnation with the intention of helping each other. Through Dolores's story in The Guardians, her groundbreaking publication, it will be revealed where we came from before being reincarnated on Earth and how we will eventually forget them, who we are, and at the same time have no memory of the contracts and agreements with other beings before coming here. After all, what happened to the seemingly normal life on this planet? When I began working in the field of hypnotic regression and past life therapy in 1979, I never imagined that this path would take me to unusual places and situations. In the years that followed, this career took me in strange turns. I've had some amazing adventures, met some interesting people from the shadows of the past, and recovered valuable information thought lost forever. Such information is brought into the light of day by the practice of incredible hypnotic regression techniques. I devote all my time to exploring the past and writing books about my findings. Insatiable curiosity, a burning desire to research, and a thirst for knowledge swept me up and led me on an endless search. At first, I was not interested in applying hypnosis to current situations unless it could be used to solve problems in one's life, problems rooted in fear, health-related fears due to the effects of a past life, or karmic connections carried into this life and affecting current family relationships. I only use the basic form of hypnosis related to understanding and controlling habits such as smoking or overeating, etc. If this form is incorporated in past life regression, what about the technique that I use? Self-development automatically brings the subject into a situation in a past life. Therefore, I do not pay attention to their present life. All of this changed when I was accidentally introduced to the phenomenon of abduction by unidentified flying objects. My exploration took a completely different and unexpected turn. The doors were opened, and I was given a glimpse into a world that others said should be shrouded in the murky darkness of mystery. Some people say that it's best not to pry into things that our human minds may not be able to understand. But if there is knowledge and understanding there, I know I will have to search and ask my endless questions. Any new research avenue is a challenge for me, and it's a challenge I can't ignore. However, entering this field of study has deviated from my normal path and will require me to change techniques and adapt to new circumstances. I became acquainted with the field of UFO research and investigation in May 1985. My friend Mildred Higgins invited me to a statewide meeting of members of the UFO Mutual Network, called MUFON for short, which was held at her home in Fayetteville, Arkansas. Mildred is the assistant director of the chapter in the state of Arkansas. She knew of my interest in the strange and unusual, and thought I might like to meet a few researchers and other interested people. Even though this meeting was not in my area of past life regression hypnosis, I thought it might be interesting to ask about the UFO cases I had read about. At the meeting, I learned that MUFON is the largest and most respected of the UFO research organizations, and that they have members all over the world. I suspected that most of the people at the meeting would be scientifically inclined, so I thought it best not to mention my work to them. Many people still considered this work an absurd field, and I took my research too seriously to be open to ridicule. At that time, my work was done discreetly, with only a few people knowing what I was researching. One man there, who would have a profound influence on my subsequent relationship with UFOs, made no impression on our first meeting. Lucius Farish is so quiet that a normal person would not seem to recognize him. He listened attentively and absorbed information like a sponge. Now I know he learned more that way than on stage. He publishes the monthly magazine UFO News Service and has all the latest information about UFOs around the world instantly at his fingertips. Before the meeting ended, I had become more comfortable with the people there and revealed that I was a hypnotist working in the field of past life research. I assumed they would brush me aside because this work certainly did not qualify as a scientific method. However, I was surprised when Walt said that hypnosis could be a useful tool and that any tool that helps extract information is welcome. After the meeting, I established contact with Lucius Farish. He supported my work and did not ridicule me as I had feared. A year passed until I had my first try at UFO research using hypnosis. By chance, in May 1986, my manager gave me a book by Strieber and suggested that I read it because it contained a description of hypnotic regression related to UFOs. At the same time, Lucius called telling me that there would be another annual gathering at Higgins' house in Fayetteville. A woman contacted him, claiming she had been abducted by aliens and wanted to undergo hypnotic regression. Lucius wanted to know if I wanted to do it. Even though I had no experience in this field, he still thought I could handle it. After all, it's hard to find anyone who has experience with this sort of thing, especially in Arkansas. He said most psychiatrists and psychologists did not want to take on the case because it was outside their area of expertise. It's not enough to just know how to do hypnosis. You have to be comfortable working with the paranormal, so you won't be confused by anything that is revealed and can proceed with the investigation properly. Objective. I definitely meet that standard, at least. I've worked long enough in the field of the strange and paranormal that I don't think anything can surprise me anymore. If I had been able to receive a dying person in an atomic bomb explosion or observe the crucifixion of Christ, I would have been more prepared than most other researchers force to be able to take on the case of alien abduction of humans. At the meeting that day, there were about 30 people in attendance, and I was concerned whether this was the right atmosphere to do this type of regression. It is certainly not a comfortable setting conducive to a successful hypnosis session. When I work, I often go to the client's home, and the hypnosis session is led in complete privacy. Sometimes there are witnesses, but always with the consent of the client, and usually there are only a few witnesses. Atmosphere is important in making the subject comfortable. I told Lucius that would be like putting that girl on display in a goldfish tank. I don't know how she will react with that many people present, and I think the audience will definitely have an influence on the outcome. I'm also secretly worried because this case is outside of my usual practice. I'm not quite sure how to proceed. My methods automatically push the subject back to a past life. I will have to adjust and change my way of working to keep her from going back to her past life and focusing on events in her present life. Since I had applied many variations to my technique, I knew I could find a method that worked. I would just have to change my process, and I don't know how impactful or effective it would be. With my other methods, it is completely predictable, although there will always be that rare individual who refuses to follow the pattern. In those cases, operators must learn to correct their technique accordingly. In this case, there is no time to practice or find new methods. I will have to do it by trial and error and improvise. In front of so many observers in the room, the above conditions were not really favorable for testing. So when I conducted the hypnosis session with the young girl, I did so with apprehension, not because of the subject matter, but because of the change in my usual way of working. Once again, I entered unfamiliar territory where the results were uncertain for many reasons. Unexpectedly, my technical variation was very effective, and we obtained a lot of information. Those present that day did not know that this was the first time I tried this type of procedure, because the hypnosis session went extremely smoothly. For me, it was a pivotal case that opened the door to UFO research. That was the first step that led me to the little gray creatures that take people out of their homes at night, to spaceship experiments, star maps, and childhood encounters. That was also the first time I came into contact with my client's fears and psychological trauma. These emotions are so overwhelming that they block information extraction. The young woman could only report what she saw and heard. She couldn't find answers to many of the questions I asked. All of this just sparked my interest and curiosity. I knew I could develop a method to overcome my emotional state and allow my subconscious mind to provide the answers. This method has worked in other cases because the subconscious mind is where all the information is. I see no reason why it couldn't work in this case, once I come up with a method. At that time, I was already working with the paranormal, so extraordinary, strange events and unexplored lands did not scare me. They only awakened the reporter's curiosity and desire to learn. When I left the meeting to go home, it was past midnight. I didn't like the idea of driving home on the highway at that time of night after going through this. All the new information rushed into my mind. I felt very doubtful and kept looking at the sky cautiously throughout the entire drive alone. Does this regression mean there really are creatures out there who are communicating with humans? What if they knew I had just done this? Perhaps they were already observing me at that moment. These thoughts make the journey uneasy. At about 1 o'clock in the morning, I turned into my house with a feeling of relief. I knew I wanted to explore this area further, but I also knew I would have to come to terms with my very personal, very human feelings about beings from space interacting with humans. Naturally, this topic evoked fear in me. Through years of watching horror movies with strange and scary alien creatures that want to take over the world, our psychology has been trained. These creatures have always been presented as a threat, not a helper. How can I keep these emotions from being transmitted to the client I am hypnotizing? I know all too well that, once a subject has entered a trance state, they perceive everything much more accurately, including the mind of the hypnotist. This case opened the door for me to work on other similar cases. It's the typical kidnapping scenario, repeated so often that it's now become commonplace. As I worked, I saw a pattern emerge, and as the pattern repeated itself, I quickly learned whether I was working on a real case or just an imaginary one. The client always sees small gray creatures with large eyes, where various medical tests are performed. Sometimes, during the testing process, they see other more human-like creatures present in the room. There was always the circular room, the table, the bright light shining from above the table, and the tools they couldn't identify. Somewhere in the room there is usually a computer-like machine, and many times the person is shown a star map or a book before they leave the ship. That person is always told that they will understand and remember the book when the time is right. There are many cases of people encountering UFOs for the first time as children. The age of 10 seems to be a crucial period. I even found a few cases where UFOs returned for 3 generations. The client's mother and grandmother were reluctant to report similar visits and events. This gave me the impression of an experiment where people studied and monitored many generations over a long period of time. During this time, I was working with Phil and recording information that later became the book The Garden Keepers. Some pieces of the puzzle are starting to fit. That book discussed the ancient astronaut theory about creatures from outer space that seeded planet Earth. I learned that these creatures have been watching us since the beginning of life on Earth. What could be more natural if those creatures continue to monitor and watch over our development? To me, this is the reason for doing tests and examinations, but they must be done secretly so as not to affect the person's life. In this book, I was told the ideal situation should be for the subject to not remember anything and continue with their normal lives. However, I have encountered cases where people still have memories of unpleasant and painful events. They are more likely to remember those events in their dreams than when they are awake. I have been told that chemicals and pollutants in our atmosphere, drugs, medications, and alcohol in a person's body can affect their brain chemistry. This causes them to remember bits, pieces, and flashes of the experience, but they remember them in a way that is distorted and clouded by emotion. They cannot remember the actual event. Their consciousness converts that event into an emotional memory. My job is to go beyond those conscious emotions and communicate directly with the subconscious, as I have done in my other works, because from experience I know that the answer is always right, sealed there. When the influence of emotional consciousness is removed, the true and accurate facts will be revealed. I have glimpsed parts of a larger picture that is only now beginning to emerge, a picture that our human minds can hardly comprehend. It may be the biggest picture ever shown to humanity, the story of who we are, where we came from, and where we are going. Are we ready to learn the secret of our own story? Several writers and researchers on the UFO phenomenon generally agree that extraterrestrials appear to be interested in some type of genetic intervention, regardless of our consent. It also appears that they were not acting purely out of a selfish medical motive, but that they were carrying out the orders of a higher authority. This is similar to how a medical staff in a hospital often seems emotionless as they perform various tests and examinations. How many times have we encountered that indifferent attitude when we wanted to ask the reason for doing tests? Even when our children express the same fear and curiosity, we often silence them by explaining that that doctor needs to know something. They won't understand. Just let them know. Be quiet and do what the doctor says. It won't hurt. Even when we know the reason for the test, we don't waste time explaining it to the child because we think it will only stir up fear and the child won't understand anyway. So we try to keep the child quiet until the job is done. This creates a feeling of distrust, like they have been deceived. In some cases, it will create fear in doctors, nurses, or hospitals. Sometimes we also misjudge the child, thinking that of course he or she will not have enough mental capacity to understand, when in reality that may not be the case. The aliens also showed the same attitude, as if they were treating a child or someone with lower intelligence than us, which even if explained, they would not understand.